Tonight, we journey through one of humanity's most powerful inventions, money itself. But this is not a lecture, not a lesson, not something that will make your mind race. This is a gentle story, told in soft, soothing tones, designed to help you drift peacefully into sleep, while discovering something profound. You will discover the psychology behind money, why humans created it in the first place, why we trust it, even though it's just metal, paper, or numbers on a screen, and why understanding this gives you power. By the time this story ends, you will see money differently, not as some mysterious force beyond your control, but as a human invention, shaped by human needs, fears, and dreams. You will understand how those who grasped money's true nature, not as a thing, but as a story we tell each other, became the architects of empires, the shapers of history, the wielders of quiet power, and most importantly, you will drift into deep, restful sleep along the way. So breathe slowly now, sink deeper into comfort, let your thoughts begin to soften, and step with me, backward through time, to a world where money did not exist. No coins jingling in pockets, no bills folded in wallets, no numbers glowing on screens, just people, living, breathing, wanting, needing, trading what they had for what they needed to survive. A simpler world perhaps, but not an easier one. And it is there, in that ancient world of uncertainty and hope, that our story begins. Chapter 1. The world before money. Picture a village, 10,000 years ago, nestled in a fertile valley, where a river flows gently through fields of wild grain. The sun rises slowly, casting golden light across simple dwellings, made of mud and straw. Smoke curls lazily from cooking fires. Children's laughter mingles with the bleating of goats and the soft rustle of wind through barley stalks. A woman named Ara wakes before dawn. Her hands are calloused from gathering. Her back aches from bending, but her heart is light this morning, because yesterday she found something precious. A wild beehive tucked into the hollow of an old oak tree. She spent hours carefully extracting the honeycomb, her hands sticky and sweet, getting stung twice but not caring. Because honey is rare, honey is valuable. Honey means she might be able to trade for what her family desperately needs. Grain. Her storehouse is nearly empty. The grinding stone sits unused. Her children asked for bread yesterday, and she had to tell them to wait. That feeling, the helplessness of not being able to provide, sits heavy in her chest. So now, as the morning light grows stronger, she pours the honey carefully into a clay pot, wipes her hands on her worn tunic, and walks slowly through the village to her neighbor's home. His name is Cowrie. He is a farmer, weathered by sun and soil, and his storehouse, she has seen it, is filled with wheat, harvested just days before, golden, abundant, everything she needs. She stands outside his door for a moment, rehearsing what she'll say, feeling the familiar anxiety of negotiation. Will he want honey? Will he think it's enough? Will he turn her away? She knocks gently. Kyle opens the door. Squinting in the bright morning light, he sees the pot in her hands, sees the hope in her eyes. "I have honey," she says quietly. "Good honey, sweet and pure. Will you trade?" Kyle is a kind man, but he is also practical. He examines the honey carefully, dips his finger in, and tastes, considers. He does need honey, yes. His wife has been asking for it, to make cakes for the coming festival. But how much grain is honey worth? He thinks, A handful? A basket? A full sack? And Ara watches his face, reading every flicker of expression, her heart beating faster, thinking, please, please let this be enough. They negotiate back and forth. Kyle suggests a small amount. Ara quietly, respectfully, asks for more, explaining how rare honey is, how much effort it took to gather. Kyle nods, understanding, but counters that grain is his family security, that giving too much could leave them hungry later. Finally, they reach an agreement that feels fair to both. Ara walks home with a basket of wheat, relief flooding through her. Tonight, her children will eat bread. This is barter, direct exchange, one thing for another. It worked, but only barely. Let's pause here and feel what Ara felt. Really feel it. Imagine waking up every day, not knowing if you'll be able to feed your family. Imagine the anxiety that sits in your stomach, like a stone. The constant calculation. What do I have? What do I need? Who might trade with me? Imagine the vulnerability of depending entirely on whether someone else wants what you have, at the exact moment you need what they have. This is called the double coincidence of wants. Ara needed grain, and she had honey. Kale wanted honey, and he had grain. Perfect. The stars aligned. The trade happened. But what if Kyle didn't want honey that day? What if he already had honey? What if he needed tools, or cloth, or salt instead? Then Ara would have had to find someone who wanted honey and had tools. Then trade those tools to someone who wanted tools and had cloth. Then trade that cloth to someone who wanted cloth and had grain. A simple exchange could take days, or weeks, or might never happen at all. And some things were impossible to divide. If you owned a cow, your family's most valuable possession, and you needed just a small amount of grain, you couldn't trade half a cow. You either traded the whole animal, losing far more than you gained, or you walked away hungry. People lived with this uncertainty every day. It created stress, it created conflict, it created a kind of quiet desperation that hummed beneath every transaction. And at night, lying on straw mats, staring up at dark ceilings, people dreamed of something better, something easier, something that would let them provide for their families, without the endless, exhausting dance of negotiation and chance. Humanity needed something everyone valued, something that could be divided easily, something that could be stored without spoiling, something that represented value without being consumed. Humanity needed a medium of exchange, but no one knew it yet. In different parts of the ancient world, in times lost to written history, separated by oceans and mountains and vast stretches of land, people independently discovered something remarkable. Certain objects, even though they weren't food or tools or shelter, began to be accepted in trade by almost everyone. On islands in the Pacific, scattered like jewels across endless blue water, people noticed that cowrie shells, small, smooth, beautiful, were hard to find. You couldn't eat them. You couldn't build with them. But they were lovely. They felt good in the hand. And because they were rare, people wanted them. A fisherman might accept a string of cowrie shells for his catch, not because he needed shells, but because he knew that tomorrow, someone else would accept those shells for something he needed. The shells became a bridge, a promise, a shared agreement, and in that agreement, something magical happened. Value became portable. In ancient China, This same realization took hold so deeply that the Chinese character for money is actually the symbol for a shell. For thousands of years, the very word for wealth was tied to these small ocean treasures. In the salt mines of the Sahara and in the great Roman Empire, salt became a form of payment. Roman soldiers, marching along dusty roads under the hot sun, received salt rations, their salarium, because salt preserved food, purified water, and was essential for survival. The word salary now still carries this ancient memory. Imagine a Roman soldier, far from home, holding a small pouch of salt crystals. He doesn't think of it as just salt. He thinks, this will buy me bread tomorrow. This will get me shelter tonight. This is my security. In North America, long before Europeans arrived, indigenous tribes wove wampum, intricate beads made from shells, into belts and strings. Each pattern carried meaning. Some represented treaties, some told stories, and some were exchanged in trade, their value recognized across hundreds of miles. A young woman in an Iroquois village might spend weeks carefully crafting a wampum belt, her fingers moving with practiced precision, threading bead after tiny bead. And when she finished, she would hold in her hands something more than shells and thread. She would hold respect, value, the ability to trade for what her family needed. These weren't money as we know it today. They couldn't buy a house or a car, but they were the first steps towards something revolutionary. They were objects that held value, not because of what they were, but because people agreed they had value. And that agreement, that collective belief, is the invisible foundation on which all money rests. Let's breathe here for a moment and recognize something profound. Money is not a thing. It has never been a thing. It is a story we tell each other, a shared dream, a promise we choose to believe. The shell has no power, the salt has no magic. The metal, the paper, the numbers on a screen, none of it has value in itself. The value exists only because we believe it does, because we trust that tomorrow someone else will believe it too. And once humanity learned to believe in this invisible value, once we learned to trust in shared stories, everything changed. Communities could grow larger, trade could reach farther, specialization could flourish. A potter could focus on making pots without worrying about growing grain, because he could trade pots for grain with someone who believed the pots had value. Civilization itself became possible because of this shared belief. But belief, as we will see, is fragile. It can be nurtured, it can be manipulated, it can be broken. And those who understood how to shape belief, how to create trust, how to destroy it, how to control it, would become the most powerful people in history. Breathe deeply now. Let this ancient world settle softly into your mind and prepare to step forward in time to the moment when metal became the language of empires. Chapter 2. The birth of coins. Now we move forward through the centuries, past generations of traders and farmers and shepherds, through the rise of early cities, through the birth of writing and the wheel and bronze tools, until we arrive at the year 600 BCE, in a kingdom that would change the world. Lydia, a small but prosperous kingdom in what is now Western Turkey, where the Aegean Sea meets the mountains of Anatolia. The Lydian people had grown wealthy from geography. Their kingdom sat along vital trade routes, connecting the Mediterranean world to the mysterious riches of the East. silk from China, spices from India, amber from the Baltic, precious stones from Persia. Every day, merchants arrived in Lydian cities like Sardis, their carts heavy with goods, their eyes sharp with calculation. They came from distant lands, speaking different languages, worshipping different gods, but all wanting the same thing: to trade. And every day, the same problem emerged. How do you trade fairly when everyone has different ideas of value? When a merchant from Greece thinks copper is worth twice what a merchant from Persia thinks. When every transaction requires weighing, testing, negotiating, arguing. It was exhausting, slow, frustrating, and it limited how much trade could happen, which limited how wealthy the kingdom could become. The Lydian kings, first Aliates, then his son, the legendary Croesus, sat in their palace and pondered this problem. They knew their kingdom's prosperity depended on trade. They knew their power came from the wealth that flowed through their cities. If trade could move faster, more smoothly, more trustingly, their kingdom would flourish. And so they made a decision that would echo through all of history. Picture a royal workshop in Sardis, the sound of hammers on metal, the heat of furnaces, skilled craftsmen working with a precious material found in the local rivers, electrum, a natural mixture of gold and silver that gleamed like sunlight. These craftsmen began cutting small, standardized pieces of electrum, each piece roughly the same size, each piece carefully weighed. And then, this was the innovation. They stamped each piece with an image. On one side, the head of a roaring lion, mouth open, mane wild, the symbol of Lydian power and strength. On the back, a simple square punch mark from the royal mint. This stamp was more than decoration. It was a promise, a guarantee. It said, "This coin contains a certain amount of precious metal. The king himself, King Croesus, whose wealth is legendary, whose word is law, vouches for its value. You can trust it. You do not need to weigh it or test it. The royal seal is proof." And suddenly, everything became easier. Imagine you are a merchant from Athens, arriving in Sardis after weeks of travel. You have olive oil to sell, packed carefully in clay amphorae. You're tired. You're far from home. You're dealing with strangers, in a strange land. In the old way, selling your oil would take hours. You'd find someone who wanted oil. You'd negotiate. They'd offer copper bars or silver fragments, or goods you'd then have to trade again. You'd have to weigh everything, test it for purity, argue about exchange rates, and always, in the back of your mind, worry. Am I being cheated? But now, with Lydian coins, it's different. You sell your oil, the buyer pays you in coins. You take those coins and look at them, feel their weight, see the lion's head stamped clearly, and you think, the king made these, the king guarantees them, I can use these to buy what I need. I can take them home, I can trust them. That feeling, that relief, that confidence is revolutionary. For the first time in human history, trust was standardized. It was literally stamped into metal. You didn't have to know the person you were trading with. You didn't have to speak their language or understand their customs. You just had to recognize the king's seal. A merchant no longer needed to carry scales and testing tools everywhere. A traveler could carry wealth in a small pouch instead of hauling carts full of goods. A soldier could be paid quickly and fairly. without disputes over the value of payment. Money, real standardized trustworthy money, had been born, and with it came something else: power. Let's pause again and feel the significance of what just happened. Whoever controlled the mint controlled the money, and whoever controlled the money controlled trade, armies, loyalty, and the future. King Croesus understood this deeply. He was not just a king, he was a strategist, a psychologist, a master of influence. He minted coins not just to help merchants trade more easily, though that helped his economy. He minted coins to project power, to spread influence, to make his kingdom unforgettable. Think about it. Every coin was a tiny ambassador of Lydia. Every coin that traveled to distant cities carried the image of the lion, the symbol of Croesus, the reminder of Lydian strength. When a merchant in Babylon held a Lydian coin, he held a piece of the king's power. When a soldier in Egypt received Lydian coins as payment, he remembered who was wealthy, who was strong, who mattered. Coins became propaganda before the word propaganda existed, and they became something else too, a tool of control. Because once people began using Lydian coins, once they became comfortable with them, dependent on them, Lydia became essential. The kingdom that controlled the standard, controlled the system. This is the first great lesson of money. It is not just a tool of convenience, it is a tool of control. And soon, other kingdoms noticed. Within decades, the idea spread like wind across dry grass, carried by merchants and soldiers and travelers who saw the brilliance of the system. The Greeks, always innovative, always competitive, began minting their own coins, but being Greek, they couldn't just copy. Each city-state wanted its own identity, its own symbolism, its own claim to greatness. Athens stamped its coins with an owl, the sacred bird of Athena, goddess of wisdom. When you held an Athenian coin, you held a symbol of intellect, democracy, culture. Corinth used a winged horse, Pegasus, represented freedom and speed. Thebes used a shield, Sparta, though resistant to commerce, eventually minted coins with their own austere symbols. Each coin told a story. Each coin was a claim. We are Athens. We are powerful. We are worth trusting. The Persians, with their vast empire stretching from Egypt to India, from the Mediterranean to the borders of the unknown East, minted gold darics, coins so pure, so consistently valuable that they became the international currency of their age. A merchant in Greece would accept a Persian daric without question. A soldier in India trusted it. It was the dollar of the ancient world. And then came Rome. Rome. The empire that would master money like no civilization before it. Roman coins didn't just carry images of gods and symbols. They carried the faces of emperors, living men who declared themselves divine. Their portraits stamped on every coin in circulation. Imagine you are a Roman soldier, stationed in cold, rainy Britannia, at the very edge of the known world. You're far from the warmth of Italy, from the olive groves and vineyards of home. You're homesick, you're tired, and you're wondering if it's worth it, this endless duty, this service to an empire that seems impossibly distant. And then payday arrives. You receive your salary in silver denarii. You hold them in your hand, feeling their weight, and you see the face, Emperor Augustus, or Trajan, or Marcus Aurelius, the man who rules the world you serve. That face reminds you, you are part of something greater. You belong to Rome. Rome pays you, Rome protects you, Rome gives your life. meaning. The coin is not just payment, it's connection, identity, propaganda. And it works. Roman coins financed the greatest armies the world had ever seen. They built roads that stretched for thousands of miles, connecting distant provinces. They funded aqueducts that brought water to cities. They paid for grain shipments that fed millions. But they also created dependencies. Soldiers relied on their pay. Citizens relied on subsidized grain, bought with coin. Provinces relied on Roman currency to trade. When the coins stopped flowing, when the empire weakened, when the money failed, the empire trembled. But here, in the Roman story, we see the first great shadow that follows money wherever it goes. Debasement. As Rome's wars grew more expensive, as its frontiers stretched across 3 continents, as its treasury began to empty, emperors faced an impossible dilemma. They needed more money to pay soldiers, more money to buy loyalty, more money to maintain the appearance of power. But they were running out of silver and gold, so they made a fateful choice. They began mixing less precious metal into their coins, adding copper, adding bronze, diluting the silver, but keeping the coins the same size, the same weight, the same appearance. At first, the change was subtle. A coin might be 95% silver instead of 98%. Who could tell? But slowly, over decades, the debasement continued. 90%, 80%, 70%. By the 3rd century, some silver coins contained barely any silver at all. And people noticed. Merchants began weighing coins more carefully. They began refusing certain coins, demanding others. Trust cracked, like old pottery. And when trust cracked, prices rose. What once cost 1 coin, now cost 2, then 5, then 10, then 100. This was the world's first experience. With inflation, imagine you are a Roman baker. In the year 250 CE, your family has been baking bread in this city for 4 generations. You are proud of your craft. You sell good bread at fair prices, but recently, something strange is happening. The coins people pay you with feel wrong, lighter, duller, less valuable. At first you ignore it. A coin is a coin, right? The emperor's face is still stamped on it. But then flour prices start rising. The miller wants more coins for the same amount of flour. When you ask why, he shrugs and says wheat farmers are demanding more coins. When you ask them why, they say seed merchants want more coins. Everyone is charging more. Because everyone has noticed. The coins are worth less. You try raising your bread prices. Your customers complain, but what choice do you have? If you don't raise prices, you can't afford flour. If you can't afford flour, you can't bake bread. If you can't bake bread, your family starves. This is inflation, not as a statistic, not as an economic concept, but as a lived experience, as anxiety, as confusion, as a slow erosion of security. And you lie awake at night wondering, will it get worse? Should I start accepting only gold? Should I go back to barter? Can I trust anything anymore? The money still exists. It still has the emperor's face, but its power, its value, is quietly slipping away, like water through cupped hands, and the people suffer. Some can no longer afford bread. Others lose their savings. Markets destabilize. Faith in the currency and in the empire itself weakens. This teaches us the second great lesson of money. Trust is its lifeblood. When people believe in the value of money, it holds power. When belief fades, when trust crumbles, the money becomes worthless, no matter what metal it's made of. no matter whose face is stamped on it, and empires built on that money collapse. Now let the ancient world of coins fade softly into the background, breathe deeply, and step forward with me through the century into a new age where money left metal behind and became something even stranger, a promise written on paper. Chapter 3: The Miracle of Paper Money. We now travel east across mountains and deserts to China during the Tang dynasty around the 7th century CE. Imagine a bustling merchant in the city of Chengdu, a place of crowded streets and flowing rivers, of silk markets and tea houses, of merchants shouting prices and customers haggling with practiced skill. His name is Wei. He is middle-aged, his face lined by years of hard work and travel. He has just completed the transaction of a lifetime, selling a massive shipment of silk to a wealthy buyer from the south, the finest silk his family has produced in 3 generations. The payment arrives, copper coins, thousands of them, good, honest money. But Wei stares at the pile and feels not joy, but dread, because that much copper weighs hundreds of pounds. Loading it onto a cart will require days. Transporting it home will require hiring guards to protect against bandits on the dangerous roads. And even then, there's no guarantee. Thieves are everywhere. One ambush, and everything he's worked for could vanish. He sits in the merchant house, tired, anxious, calculating risks in his mind. And then someone tells him about a new system, a group of trusted merchants, a guild with branches in many cities, has begun offering a service. You deposit your coins with them. They weigh it, count it, record it carefully in their ledgers, and in return they give you a piece of paper. Paper. Wei almost laughs. Paper? What good is paper? But they explain. This paper is a certificate, a promise. It states that the bearer of this note can exchange it for the exact amount of copper coins at any guild location. You travel light, you travel safe. When you reach your destination, you exchange the paper for real coins. Wei hesitates. It sounds too strange, too risky. What if the paper is lost? What if the guild refuses to honor it? What if this is some kind of trick? But the guild is reputable. Other merchants vouch for them, and the alternative, hauling hundreds of pounds of copper across dangerous roads, is worse. So Wei makes a choice. He deposits his coins. He receives a piece of paper, carefully inscribed with official seals and signatures. He folds it carefully, tucks it into his robe, and travels home. Let's pause and feel what Wei felt. During that journey home, he's walking along a dusty road. The sun is warm on his shoulders. His bag is light, too light. In the past, he would have felt the weight of his wealth. The coins would have pulled at his shoulder, a constant reminder. This is real. This is mine. Now he carries only paper. Every few hours, he takes it out and looks at it, unfolds it carefully, reads the words again, touches the seals, reassures himself. This represents value. This is as good as coins. But the doubt never fully leaves. What if he arrives and they say, "Sorry, we don't recognize this"? What if the guild has closed? What if the seals are forged and he never knew? He imagines his family's faces when he returns empty-handed, the shame, the failure. But he also imagines arriving safely, paper intact, exchanging it smoothly for coins, carrying his wealth home without incident. This internal battle between fear and trust, between the tangible and the abstract, is what every person faced when paper money was born. And when Wei finally reaches his city, walks to the local guild branch, presents the paper, and watches as they calmly, professionally, count out his coins exactly as promised, he feels something shift inside him. Relief, yes, but also wonder. The paper worked, the promise held, the invisible agreement was real. Money had just become less material, more conceptual, more about belief than substance. At first, paper certificates were used only by merchants, a convenience, a private arrangement between traders and guilds, but the Chinese government saw its potential. By the Song dynasty, in the 11th century, the state itself began issuing paper money called jiaozi, backed by reserves of precious metals held in imperial treasuries. This was revolutionary. For the first time in history, a government was printing its own currency, not minting coins, which required metal and time and craftsmanship. Just printing paper quickly, cheaply, abundantly. The benefits were immediate. Trade accelerated, the economy boomed, merchants could move large sums easily, the government could pay armies without hauling tons of metal. But, and there is always a but, this system had a danger the ancient world had never faced. The government could print more paper, whenever it wanted, and when they did, without increasing the gold or silver backing it. Trust would erode, prices would rise, and the value would vanish, like morning mist. Let's imagine a farmer. During the Yuan dynasty, a century after paper money became widespread, his name is Zhang. He works the land. His family has farmed for generations. Every harvest, he sells his rice to the government in exchange for paper money. At first, the system works beautifully. The paper buys everything he needs: tools, cloth, salt, seed for next year. But slowly, things start changing. One year, a bag of salt costs 10 paper notes. The next year, 15. The year after, 25. Zhang is confused. His rice hasn't become less valuable. The salt hasn't become better. So why does it cost more? He doesn't understand inflation. He doesn't know that the government, desperate to fund wars and palaces, has been printing more and more paper money, without restraint. All he knows is that the paper in his hands buys less and less with each passing season. He tries saving for his daughter's wedding, but by the time the wedding arrives, his savings are worthless. The paper that should have bought a feast now barely buys a sack of rice. He feels betrayed, cheated. The government promised this paper had value. They lied. And he's not alone. Across China, people are losing faith. Merchants refuse paper money, demanding silver or gold or goods instead. The system collapses. By the Yuan dynasty's end, excessive printing had caused such severe inflation that paper money lost all credibility. The government tried forcing people to use it. Punishments were issued for refusing it. But you cannot force belief. You cannot legislate trust. And so, for centuries after, China abandoned paper money. They returned to coins, returned to something they could hold. Wei. Trust. The lesson was learned the hard way. Paper money works only as long as people believe in it, and belief can be destroyed by those who control the printing. Now we cross continents and centuries, moving to 17th and 18th century Europe. The Chinese experience was largely unknown in Europe, so Europeans rediscovered the same idea independently and made the same mistakes. Banks began issuing their own notes, promises to pay the bearer a certain amount of gold or silver on demand. In Sweden, in 1661, the Stockholm Banco issued Europe's first true banknotes. The bank failed within a few years, destroyed by printing too many notes. In England, Goldsmiths, who stored gold for wealthy clients in their secure vaults, began issuing receipts. These receipts could be traded as money. A wealthy merchant might deposit 100 gold coins with a goldsmith and receive a paper receipt. Instead of going back to retrieve the gold when he needed to make a payment, he'd just give the paper to someone else. That person could redeem it for gold, or pass it to another person, slowly. These receipts became more trusted than the gold itself. Why? Because they were easier, lighter, more convenient. And here's the key. Most people never redeemed them. They just kept passing the paper around, trusting that if they ever needed to, they could get the gold. This created an opportunity and a temptation. Goldsmiths realized, we're holding all this gold, but no one's taking it out. What if we issue more receipts? Then we actually have gold, and they did. This was the birth of fractional reserve banking, the practice of keeping only a fraction of deposits on hand, while lending out the rest. It worked, as long as everyone didn't demand their gold at the same time. But occasionally a panic struck, rumors spread, people rushed to withdraw their gold, and banks collapsed when they couldn't fulfill all the promises they'd made. This cycle, confidence, overextension, panic, collapse, would repeat throughout history. Let's step back and recognize the profound psychological shift happening here. For thousands of years, money was tangible. You could hold it, feel its weight, test its purity, trust your senses. Now, money was becoming abstract, a promise, a note reference in value held somewhere else. And this required a new kind of trust, not in an object, but in an institution, in a bank, in a government, in a system. This is harder for the human mind. We are wired to trust what we can see and touch. Trust in the invisible requires something different. Faith in human institutions, faith in systems, faith in the promises of strangers. And when that faith is honored, societies flourish, trade expands, economies grow. But when that faith is betrayed, when banks fail, when governments print recklessly, when promises break, the collapse is deeper, more painful, more psychologically damaging than the loss of any metal coin, because it's not just money that's lost, it's trust. And rebuilding trust is far harder than minting new coins. Breathe deeply now, feel the weight of this transformation, and prepare to step forward again into the 20th century, where money becomes entangled with gold, with governments, with power itself. Chapter 4: The Gold Standard and its Collapse. For much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, the major economies of the world operated under a system called the gold standard. It was simple in concept, profound in effect. Every unit of a currency, every dollar, every pound, every franc, could be exchanged for a specific amount of gold, held in a government vault. If you had a $20 bill, you could walk into a bank and exchange it for roughly 1 ounce of gold. The paper was just a convenient representation of the real thing. This system created stability, fixed exchange rates, predictable trade, because everyone knew exactly what their money was worth, not in abstract terms, but in actual tangible gold. Imagine you're a merchant in London in the year 1900. You're trading with partners in New York, Paris, and Berlin. Exchange rates are stable. A pound is worth a certain amount of gold. A dollar is worth a certain amount of gold. Converting between them is straightforward. Mathematical, trustworthy. You can plan, you can invest, you can build long-term business relationships across borders without worrying the currency values will suddenly shift and destroy your profits. This stability helped fuel the rapid industrialization and global trade of the late 1800s. Railways crossed continents, telegraph lines spanned oceans, goods flowed freely, but the gold standard also created limitations, strict limitations, frustrating limitations, because governments could only print as much money as they had gold to back it. If a country wanted to spend more, to build roads, to fund schools, to fight a war, it had to either raise taxes, borrow money, or acquire more gold. It couldn't just print more currency. The gold supply constrained everything. From a citizen's perspective, the gold standard feels safe, secure. You know your money is backed by something real, something that's been valued for thousands of years, something governments can't just create out of thin air. You sleep better at night, knowing that your savings won't evaporate due to reckless government printing. But from a government leader's perspective, during times of crisis, the gold standard feels like chains. Imagine you're the president of a nation facing war. Your country is under attack. You need to mobilize armies, build weapons, feed soldiers. You need money. Vast amounts of it, quickly. But you can't just print it. You're constrained by how much gold sits in your vault, and getting more gold is nearly impossible during wartime. So you borrow. You raise taxes on citizens already suffering. You make painful cuts to other programs, and you watch as the enemy, if they have more gold reserves, can outspend you, outlast you, defeat you. This tension between stability and flexibility, between restraint and freedom, between protecting savers and empowering governments, is fundamental to the story of money. And in the 20th century, under the pressures of total war and economic catastrophe, the gold standard would break. In 1929, the United States and much of the world plunged into the Great Depression. Stock markets crashed. Banks failed by the thousands. Factories closed. Unemployment soared to 25%. Families lost their homes, their savings, everything. Breadlines stretched for blocks. People who had been prosperous a year ago now stood in the cold, hoping for a bowl of soup, and the economy seemed frozen, locked, unable to restart. President Franklin Roosevelt, taking office in 1933, faced impossible choices. Traditional economic wisdom said, maintain the gold standard, keep money sound, wait for markets to correct themselves. But markets weren't correcting. People were starving. Businesses were dying. The social fabric was tearing. Roosevelt made a controversial, unprecedented decision. In April 1933, he issued Executive Order 6102, requiring Americans to turn in most of their gold to the government in exchange for paper money. Hoarding gold became illegal. Why? Because he needed flexibility. He needed to print more money, to inject it into the economy, to get people spending again, to break the deflationary spiral that was crushing the nation. Imagine you're a farmer in Kansas in 1933. For generations, your family has saved carefully. You've put away gold coins for emergencies, for your children's future, for security. Now the government is ordering you to turn in that gold. They'll give you paper dollars in exchange, at a fixed rate, $20.67 per ounce. You stand in your kitchen, holding those heavy gold coins in your hand, feeling their weight, their reality. And you think, this is real, this is mine. I earned this. The paper dollars they are offering, those are just promises. The government can print more whenever they want. How do I know those dollars will still have value in 10 years? In 20? But refusing means breaking the law, facing fines, possibly prison. So you comply. You take your gold to the bank. You watch as they weigh it, count it, hand you paper bills, and you walk home with a sick feeling in your stomach, wondering if you've just been robbed by your own government. This moment, this forced exchange, represents a fundamental shift in the psychological contract between citizens and the state. The government was saying, trust us, we know better. This paper will hold value because we say it will. And people, having no choice, complied. But the trust was damaged, the sense of security eroded. Then came World War II, and money became a weapon of war itself. Nations printed vast amounts of currency to fund the largest military conflict in human history. Traditional economic rules were suspended. Everything was subordinated to one goal: victory. After the war, in 1944, representatives from 44 nations met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to create a new international monetary system. They established the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, backed by gold at $35 per ounce. Other currencies would be pegged to the dollar. The dollar would be convertible to gold for foreign governments, not individuals. This system acknowledged American economic dominance. The US held most of the world's gold. The US had the strongest economy, so the dollar became the anchor. For decades, this worked. International trade flourished, economies rebuilt. The post-war boom lifted millions into prosperity. But there was a problem lurking beneath the surface. The US was printing more dollars than it had gold to back them, financing wars in Korea and Vietnam, funding social programs, spending beyond its means. Other nations noticed. France, under President Charles de Gaulle, began demanding gold in exchange for the dollars they held. They were calling America's bluff. And in 1971, President Richard Nixon faced a choice: admit the US didn't have enough gold to cover all the dollars in circulation, or end the gold standard entirely. On August 15th, 1971, Nixon appeared on television and announced the US dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. This moment, August 15th, 1971, was a turning point in human history. For the first time, the world's most powerful currency was backed by nothing but trust in the US government. No gold, no silver, no commodity, just a promise. And the world accepted it. Why? Because the US was powerful, its economy was vast, its military unmatched, its culture dominant. People believed the dollar would hold value because they believed in American strength. This is called fiat currency, money by decree, money because the government says so. And today, almost every currency in the world is fiat. Let's pause and really absorb this. The money in your pocket, the numbers in your bank account, they have no intrinsic value. They're not backed by gold or silver or any commodity. They're backed only by collective belief, by trust in institutions, by faith that tomorrow someone else will accept them. This is both miraculous and terrifying. Miraculous because it means money can be as flexible as human needs require. Governments can respond to crises, economies can grow without being constrained by arbitrary metal supplies. Terrifying because it means the entire system rests on nothing but psychology, on shared stories, on faith. And if that faith breaks, everything collapses. History shows us what happens when governments abuse this power. In Germany after World War I, the Weimar Republic faced impossible war debts, so they printed money to pay them. More and more, and more. Inflation spiraled out of control. Prices doubled every few days. A loaf of bread that cost a few marks in the morning might cost millions by the afternoon. People carried money in wheelbarrows, not because they were rich, but because it took wheelbarrows full of paper to buy groceries. Life savings, accumulated over generations, became worthless overnight. An elderly woman who had carefully saved her entire life discovered her savings couldn't buy a single egg. The psychological devastation was profound. People lost faith not just in money, but in society itself. The chaos contributed to the rise of extremism, to desperation, to the conditions that eventually led to World War II. In Zimbabwe in the 2000s, the government printed currency so recklessly that inflation reached billions of percent. They printed $100 trillion notes, pieces of paper that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. People abandoned the currency entirely. They turned to US dollars, to barter, to anything but their own national money. In Venezuela in recent years, the same tragedy unfolded. Hyperinflation, empty shelves, a currency no one trusted. People fleeing the country, carrying whatever wealth they could in any form but their own money. These aren't ancient warnings, there are modern lessons. They remind us fiat currency can work beautifully, creating prosperity and flexibility, but it requires discipline, restraint, trustworthiness. Without those, it can destroy an economy faster than any external enemy ever could. Breathe deeply now. Let the weight of these collapses settle, and prepare to step forward into our modern world, where money becomes invisible numbers, flowing at the speed of light. Chapter 5: The Digital Revolution. In the second half of the 20th century, something extraordinary happened. Money stopped being physical. Oh, cash still existed. You could still hold a dollar bill, still jingle coins in your pocket. But more and more, money became numbers on a screen, abstract, intangible, invisible. It started slowly, quietly, with innovations that seemed mundane at the time, but would reshape civilization. Checks appeared in the early 20th century, pieces of paper instructing a bank to transfer funds from one account to another. Not money itself, but a message about money. Then, in the 1950s, came credit cards, small rectangles of plastic that allowed people to spend money they didn't yet have, trusting they'd pay it back later. This was revolutionary. It separated the moment of purchase from the moment of payment. Imagine the psychological shift. For all of human history, you would only spend what you had. Now, suddenly, you could spend what you hoped to have. This changed everything about consumption, about debt, about the relationship between present and future. Banks built massive computer systems to track it all. Balances, transfers, loans, investments, millions of transactions flowing through electronic networks. And then came the internet. By the 1990s and early 2000s, money began moving at speeds that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. A number could vanish from an account in New York and appear in an account in Tokyo in seconds. No armored trucks, no ships carrying gold, no physical movement at all, just data. Electrons flowing through fiber optic cables beneath oceans and cities, pulses of light carrying value across the world. Let's feel what this meant for real people. Imagine you're a mother in the Philippines, working as a nurse in Dubai. You're far from home, far from your children, sacrificing years of your life to earn money that can give them a better future. In the old world, sending money home meant physical transfers, slow and expensive, taking weeks and eating up chunks of your earnings in fees. Now, you open an app on your phone, you type an amount, you press send, and within seconds, your sister in Manila receives a notification. Money has arrived. Your children can eat tonight, can buy school supplies tomorrow, can see a doctor if they're sick. This instant transfer across 4,000 miles would have been impossible, literally impossible, just decades ago. Now it's routine. For most people, money was now just a number they checked on their phone. Their paycheck arrived not as cash in an envelope, but as a deposit notification. They paid bills not by mailing checks, but by clicking buttons. They bought groceries by swiping cards that communicated wirelessly with machines. Money had become invisible, a concept more than a thing. But this invisibility created psychological changes we're still grappling with. When money is physical, when you have to count out bills, when you feel your wallet getting lighter, spending has a psychological weight. You feel it leaving. You hesitate. When money is just numbers on a screen, spending becomes frictionless, almost too easy. Studies show people spend more with credit cards than with cash. Why? Because swiping a card doesn't feel like giving something away. The number in your account decreases, but you don't see it or feel it. In the moment, a teenager today can spend $100 on an app purchase with a tap of their finger, barely registering what they've done. Their grandparents, who remember carefully counting out bills, are horrified by this casualness, but the teenager has never known money as physical. To them, it has always been abstract, numbers, data, disconnected from reality. This creates vulnerability. It makes it easier to overspend, to accumulate debt, to lose track of what's real. But it also creates possibility. Money can move faster, reach further, serve more people than ever before. The question is, who controls these invisible flows? As money became digital, something else happened. It became controlled by fewer and fewer institutions. Banks merged. Payment systems consolidated. A handful of companies, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, became gatekeepers of digital transactions. If these companies decided you couldn't use their services, you were cut off from the financial system. Your money might exist somewhere, but you couldn't access it, couldn't spend it, couldn't transfer it. And governments gained unprecedented surveillance capabilities. Every digital transaction leaves a trail. Every purchase, every transfer, every financial decision, all recorded, all traceable, all potentially monitored. For law enforcement, this was powerful. Criminal money laundering became harder, tax evasion more difficult, terrorism financing easier to track. But for individuals concerned about privacy, about freedom, about the power of institutions, this was troubling. Your financial life was no longer private. Every purchase told a story about you, where you went, what you bought, who you associated with, what you valued, even what you believed. And this data was held not by you, but by corporations and governments. Then, in 2008, the global financial system nearly collapsed. Banks that seemed invincible failed overnight. Lehman Brothers, one of the oldest, most respected investment firms in America, vanished. Bear Stearns collapsed. AIG needed a government bailout to survive. The stock market plunged. Millions of people lost their homes through foreclosure. Savings evaporated. Jobs disappeared. Why? Because banks had made reckless bets on complex financial instruments few people understood. They had hidden risks. They had assumed housing prices would rise forever. They had gambled with other people's money and lost. Governments stepped in. They printed trillions of dollars, literally created money out of nothing to bail out failing banks, to prevent total collapse, to save the system. And it worked barely. The system survived, but trust was shattered. Imagine you're a factory worker in Ohio for 20 years. You've worked hard, paid your mortgage, saved for retirement. You played by the rules. Then 2008 hits. Your factory closes because demand collapses. You lose your job. You fall behind on mortgage payments. The bank forecloses. Your family loses a home you'd worked 2 decades to pay for. Meanwhile, you watch on TV as the banks, the very institutions whose recklessness caused this crisis, receive billions in government bailouts. The executives keep their jobs, their bonuses, their luxury lifestyles. And you think, the system isn't fair, it's rigged, it protects them, not me. This feeling, this sense of betrayal, of a system designed to serve the powerful while ordinary people suffer, spread across the world. People realize the money they believed in, the institutions they trusted, the rules they thought were fair, and all of it could be bent or broken to serve those in control. And in that moment of disillusionment, someone somewhere had an idea. What if there was a form of money that no government could print, no bank could control, no central authority could manipulate? What if money could belong to the people again? On October 31st, 2008, just weeks after Lehman Brothers collapsed, just as the financial crisis exploded across headlines, an anonymous person or group, using the name Satoshi Nakamoto, published a 9-page paper online. It was titled, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Most people ignored it. It seemed like another internet curiosity. Technical jargon from some programmer somewhere. But the idea was radical, revolutionary, even beautiful in its simplicity. Create a digital currency that exists only on a decentralized network of computers scattered across the world, no central bank, no government backing, no corporation controlling it, just code, mathematics, and a public ledger, a blockchain that everyone can see, but no one can alter. Every transaction recorded permanently, every coin accounted for, complete transparency, combined with pseudonymity, and the supply fixed forever. Only 21 million bitcoins would ever exist. No one could print more, ever. This was designed to be the opposite of fiat currency, where dollars could be created endlessly by governments. Bitcoin was scarce like gold, where banks controlled accounts and could freeze them. Bitcoin was peer-to-peer, where governments could censor transactions. Bitcoin was borderless and censorship resistant, where trust required institutions, Bitcoin trusted mathematics. At first, almost no one cared. Bitcoin was a curiosity, used by cryptographers and libertarians, and internet enthusiasts who believed in its philosophy more than its practicality. The first real-world Bitcoin transaction, someone bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoins. At the time, that seemed like a fun experiment. Today, those Bitcoins would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, slowly, steadily. People began to notice. By 2010, Bitcoin had a price a fraction of a cent. By 2013, it reached over $1,000 for the first time. People started paying attention. By 2017, it soared to nearly $20,000. The media exploded with stories. Everyone was talking about it. By 2021, it surged past $60,000. People who had bought Bitcoin early, when it was worth pennies, became millionaires overnight. Some became billionaires. Stories spread of the programmer who bought Bitcoin in 2010 and forgot about it, only to discover years later he was wealthy. But more importantly, Bitcoin sparked a movement. Thousands of other cryptocurrencies emerged. Ethereum, with smart contracts that could automate agreements. Litecoin, faster and cheaper for everyday transactions. Ripple, designed for banks. Cardano, Solana, Polkadot, each with different features, different philosophies, different dreams. Some governments embraced it. El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, believing it could help citizens escape cycles of poverty and dependence on remittances. Others banned it, fearing loss of control. China outlawed cryptocurrency mining and trading. India wavered between bans and regulation. Traditional banks mocked it, then quietly began investing in it, building services around it, accepting that it wasn't going away. And people around the world, especially in countries with unstable currencies, began using it. In Venezuela, where hyperinflation destroyed the national currency, people turned to Bitcoin to preserve wealth. In Argentina, where the peso lost value year after year, crypto offered an alternative. In Nigeria, where government capital controls limited how much money people could move, Bitcoin offered freedom. For many people, cryptocurrency represented something deeper than just a new payment method. It represented hope. The hope that ordinary people could have financial sovereignty, that wealth didn't have to be controlled by distant institutions, that alternatives existed to a system that seemed rigged. But cryptocurrency was not perfect. Far from it. It was volatile. Bitcoin's price could swing 20% in a day, making it terrifying for people who just wanted stability. It was complicated. Most people struggled to understand how it worked, how to keep it secure, how to avoid scams. It was used by criminals for ransomware attacks, money laundering, buying illegal goods. This tarnished its reputation, and it was energy intensive. Bitcoin mining consumed as much electricity as entire countries, raising environmental concerns. Critics called it a speculative bubble, a pyramid scheme, digital tulip mania. Believers called it the future, a peaceful revolution, the separation of money and state, and whether cryptocurrency ultimately succeeds or fails, whether Bitcoin becomes as common as dollars, or fades into history like so many currencies before it. It has already changed the conversation forever. It has forced governments, banks, and citizens to ask, who should control money? What gives money value? What do we want from our financial system? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're the right questions. Now, let us step back one final time and ask, where does this all lead? Chapter 6. The Future of Money. Today, as cryptocurrency grows and challenges the old order, governments are not standing still. Central banks around the world are developing their own digital currencies, CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies. These are not like Bitcoin. They are not decentralized. They are not beyond government control. They are the opposite: digital money fully controlled, monitored, and managed by central banks. China has already launched a digital yuan. Citizens can download an app and make payments directly through the government system. Every transaction visible to authorities, every payment traceable. The European Union is piloting a digital euro. The United States is researching a digital dollar. India, Brazil, Russia. Dozens of nations are developing similar systems. For governments, this is power beyond anything that came before. They could see exactly how money moves through the economy. They could stop transactions instantly if they deemed them illegal or undesirable. They could implement policies like negative interest rates to discourage saving, or stimulus payments deposited directly into citizens' wallets with perfect precision and speed. They could, in theory, program money itself. This payment can only be used for food. This money expires if not spent within 30 days. This account cannot purchase certain goods. Money will become not just a medium of exchange, but a tool of social engineering. Let's imagine what this might feel like. You're a citizen in a country that has fully adopted a central bank digital currency. There is no cash anymore. All money is digital, flowing through the government system. You buy coffee one morning. The transaction is instant, convenient, seamless, but it's also recorded. What you bought, where, when, how much you donate to a political organization you believe in, recorded. Visible to authorities. You purchase a book on a controversial topic, recorded. You send money to a relative who's fallen on hard times, recorded. Every financial decision you make tells a story, and someone somewhere has access to that story. Now imagine the government announces new policies. Certain types of purchases are restricted. Certain organizations cannot receive donations. Certain people, deemed problematic by some algorithm or bureaucrat, have their accounts frozen. You've broken no law, had no trial, been given no chance to defend yourself. But suddenly, your money doesn't work. You can't buy food, can't pay rent, can't function in society. This is not science fiction. China's social credit system already does versions of this. In Canada in 2022, during trucker protests, the government froze bank accounts of people donating to protesters, even legally. The technology exists, the power exists. The question is, will it be used? And if so, how? And so we arrive at the heart of the matter, this question that has echoed through this entire journey. Money has always been about two forces in tension: control and freedom. Those in power want to control money, because controlling money means controlling people. It means shaping behavior, directing society, maintaining order, or maintaining their own position. Individuals want freedom with money, because freedom with money means autonomy, privacy, dignity, opportunity, the ability to make choices without asking permission. Throughout history, this tension has ebbed and flowed like tides. When gold was money, Individuals had more freedom. You could hold it, hide it, carry it across borders, trade it without anyone's permission. But trade was slow, clunky, limited. When governments issued paper, trade became faster, economies more dynamic, but control centralized. Governments could print, inflate, devalue. When banks went digital, convenience exploded, but privacy eroded. Every transaction left a trail. When cryptocurrency emerged, freedom seemed within reach again, but volatility, complexity, and regulatory pressure kept most people away. And now, as central bank digital currencies arrive, the pendulum swings hard toward control, total visibility, perfect tracking, programmable money. The question is, where will it settle? Will the future be one of financial surveillance, where governments see and manage every penny, where freedom becomes a memory? Or will a balance emerge, where people have tools for both privacy and participation, where transparency and freedom coexist? The answer will be written not by technology alone, but by the choices we make, the systems we support, the values we defend, the lines we refuse to let be crossed. And as we drift toward the close of this long journey, let us remember one timeless truth that has echoed through every age, every civilization, every system. Money is not gold, or paper, or code, or numbers. Money is belief. It is an agreement, a story, a collective dream that we as a society choose to believe in. The cowrie shell had no inherent value. The gold coin had no inherent value beyond the metal itself. The paper bill certainly has no inherent value. The number on a screen, even less. All of it, every system, every currency, every monetary innovation in human history worked because people believed it would work. And when belief died, the money died with it. This is why trust is sacred in monetary systems, why honesty matters, why transparency, integrity, and restraint determine whether currencies survive or collapse. And this is why control over money is control over belief itself. In ancient Lydia, the king's stamp on a coin created belief in its value. In Rome, the emperor's face made it propaganda, but also promise. In China, the government's guarantee made paper valuable until they broke the promise, and belief died. In modern America, the strength of the nation made dollars the world's reserve currency. Not gold backing, but power, influence, the belief that America would endure. And today, in the age of cryptocurrency and digital systems, the story's being rewritten once again. Those who understand this, those who see that money is not a thing, but a narrative, an instrument of influence, a tool of power, will shape the future. Those who control the story of money will control the story of the world, and those who do not understand this will be shaped by it. Closing. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, let this long, winding journey settle softly into your mind, like snow falling on still water, from shells traded on ancient shores, to coins stamped with the faces of kings, to paper promises backed by gold, to invisible numbers flowing through wires at the speed of light, to encrypted code living on blockchains, scattered across the world. Money has always been evolving, changing, adapting to the needs and dreams and fears of the people who used it. And at every step, those who understood its true nature, not as a fixed object, but as a tool of power, as a psychological phenomenon, as a shared story, were the ones who shaped civilizations. They built empires, they financed revolutions, they created wealth beyond imagination, They wielded influence that rippled across continents and centuries. Because they understood the truth we've walked through tonight. Money is belief, and belief is power. Think of Ara, the ancient woman trading honey for grain, feeling the anxiety of survival, the hope for her children's future. Think of Wei, the Chinese merchant holding a piece of paper, choosing to trust the invisible promise it represented. Think of the Roman baker, watching his coins lose value, feeling his security crumble, powerless to stop it. Think of the German family in 1923, carrying wheelbarrows of money that couldn't buy bread. Think of the Venezuelan mother today, watching inflation devour her savings, turning to cryptocurrency as her last hope. All of them caught in the currents of money, shaped by decisions made by distant powers, living through systems they didn't design, but couldn't escape. This is the human story of money, not the dates and numbers and institutions, but the feelings, the fears, the hopes, the dreams. As your breathing slows now, as your thoughts begin to soften and blur, carry this awareness with you. Whoever controls the story of money controls the story of the world. And that story is still being written. It's being written in government offices, where central banks debate digital currencies. It's being written in computer code by programmers building the next cryptocurrency. It's being written in market exchanges, where billions flow every second. It's being written in small decisions by ordinary people. What to save, what to spend, what to trust. And perhaps, in some small way, you are part of that story too, because every time you choose what to value, what to trust, what to believe in, you are participating in the ancient, ongoing negotiation that is money itself. But for tonight, rest. Let the weight of history dissolve into stillness. Let the rivers of currency flow quietly in the background. Let your mind release its grip on questions and concerns. Let your body grow heavy, warm, perfectly comfortable. Let sleep come gently, softly, like a tide washing over sand. And may you wake tomorrow with a deeper understanding of the invisible force that shapes our lives. May you see money not as a thing to be feared or worshipped, but as a tool to be understood. And may you use that understanding wisely. Rest now and sleep deeply, peacefully, completely. Good night.